Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Did you miss me? I definitely missed you. So I've been marinating sick for a whole week, and during this week there's a lot of good news that we need to talk about how Russian planes are dropping like flies, about how there are finally movements on supplying Ukraine with ammunition available in the third-party countries across the world. All really great news, and we're definitely going to talk about this. But what was happening during this week while I was sick is that I got news coming at me from everywhere. And because I didn't do videos, I did not have a chance to vent it out, to yell at some screen, to yell at everything wrong with this world. And so today we're going to be having like a special comeback episode where you will not hear one rant from me. You will not hear two rants from me, not even three. It's going to be whole 5 topics that I want to cover today, which completely infuriated me during the last week. So let's get started right away. So Zelensky held a press conference where journalists were able to ask questions about how the war is going, what's the plan, what's the expectations. He flown around there certain numbers, such as the casualty rate of 31,000, which is, I think, completely inaccurate. What I think Zelensky is saying by 31,000 dead Ukrainians, he is lying by omission. I think he's not taking into account heavily wounded Ukrainians, which are out of combat. He's also not counting the Ukrainians that are supposedly right now missing in action. I think he's just on purpose lying by omission, which I think is not true. I believe the more accurate ratio that we are seeing right now with Russian casualties to Ukrainian is something closer to 1 to 3, 1 to 4, so maybe 3 to 5. 3,5. That's a more realistic one. I don't expect it to be like Zelensky says once to, what is it, like 6? Something that's a little bit unrealistic. But the downside that got me mad on that stream was specifically Western media, because of course it did. 90% of Western media questions that were asked to Zelensky were a variation of, wow, from our perspective, the war is not going really well, like it's really, really bad. So, when you finally gonna give up? When are you going to finally talk with Putin? And I don't want to go in depth. That's why it's just number 5. I just wanted to underscore that Western journalists have learned nothing. The journalistic standards, nothing. The memory is still goldfish. And the only thing that they're listening to is how to finally sell the losing Ukraine and then say, oh, we told you so. I just have words, but like mostly there are emotions. But let's go to the number 4. And number 4 is bitch-made pro-Ukrainian crowd that I marked for yourself. More specifically, because right now there's a huge discussion about Zelensky, what is he doing with the mobilization, what is happening with Zaluzhny's dismissal, how the situation is looking out on the front line, what the new team is bringing. And one of the major arguments that completely got me absolutely livid is the argument as to, wow, we don't have any fortified front lines on the map, on the front line. We don't have any major fortifications. Why is that? Zelensky at fault. Let's say that Zelensky is wrong. So, and that's the same people, with all respect to General Zaluzhny here, and that's the same people that were also yelling how good the Zaluzhny was. But my question to them is, who was in charge specifically at constructing these defensive lines? Is it maybe the army that is responsible for constructing defensive positions for themselves, in the way how they're supposed to fight? Or not? Who was in charge of the army? Could you pray tell me? Because the same people that are now shitting on Zelensky, and again, I am not saying that Zaluzhny is shit and Zelensky is super good. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the concept in economics, which is called opportunity costs. Opportunity costs is what you give away of something, and you don't do that to do something else. So The same is also happening in a warfare. If there are no major constructed defense fortifications, it doesn't mean that the army and everyone else were just, slacking and doing nothing. It means that they were just using the resources available to them to do something else. And when we're talking about, well, what do you mean, Georgie? Like, couldn't they just dig a couple of trenches? Okay, let's imagine. If we want to build some kind of network trench fortification, we need 50,000 soldiers. Now imagine, and it's again not a realistic scenario, but as a parallel for you to understand. If those 50,000 soldiers instead would be put to produce ammunition and produce FPV drones, what do you think would have more immediate and impactful, to put the pun in there, effect on the front lines? Having 50,000 troops producing more ammunition or delivering logistics and so on, or them just digging trenches and then the people on the front lines not having these resources available? People don't understand that Ukraine is fighting the minority resource position. Ukraine is not a country that is just overflowing with resources. And when I'm saying resources, both human resources and equipment and everything else, there are limits to it. People that will be digging trenches will not be working in business, if we're taking civilian sector and so on. There are reasons why certain things were not done to the best extent. And then people start quoting you, yeah, but I know a person on the front line. People from the front line are not a good source for evaluating general situation of the war, the state of the war. For peoples at the front line, it's hell. It's absolute nightmare. War for them is an endless tragedy of friends that they were having lunch with yesterday being dead today. It's a nightmare incarnate. For them, there are no easy days. It's absolutely horrible. There are no easy fights for them. You can say, oh, it's a hard fight in Avdiivka, but then it means the fight around, I don't know, somewhere around Terni is probably easier. No, you ask a person from Terni fighting, he's going to say it's a fucking nightmare here. So we need to always have a very steady approach in understanding how the situation is developing. And I'm going to cover this more in details in maybe next video, where I'm going to be covering what's the situation on the front lines, because that has been pissing me off to no end, where pure Ukrainian crowd just painting a picture that has nothing to do with reality, that is just taking effects that are happening in reality, twisting and turning to fit their narratives. We need to be better than that. Number 3, border deal with the Republicans at US. I've said a lot, I've yelled a lot and so on, and I had some pro-Trump Republicans yelling at me, saying, or writing me emails saying, oh, Georgia, I really like your content, but we in US, we really need to take care about ourselves, and so on. At that moment, when these words come out of your mouth, you are not my friend. You want my family and friends dead. You state that the political issues within somewhere at your place is more important than the life of my family. You are not my friend, or something. You are absolutely horrible human being. You've given away some humanity that you had for any kind of partisan politic activities that you think are important. Because what's right now is happening, and I'm going to quote the words here. So it's on my Twitter account. The person's name is Ifausum. And he stated, so in other words, Moscow Mike is saying that US must learn to walk before taking up something challenging and serious like chewing gum. That's the situation we're in. Ukraine policy, support for Ukraine, is minuscule. It has little to no impact on US. It does not take away from US. It's a win-win-win for US, because majority of the money does not even leave US. The money does not leave US. US companies get the orders to produce equipment. It's a benefit for US. So when you're saying, oh, we don't want to do this beneficial thing for US, and instead we want to have political thing. So please, why don't your family and friends go to the front lines and die without weapons? Fuck you. So when we're talking about what is the general perspective of where are we going to end with this, it's a non-issue. It was never supposed to be linked between the border policy that US has and Ukraine, because we know that it's specifically Ukraine, because the MAGA Republicans have clearly stated that they wanted to pass the support for Israel, but they just didn't want to pass the support for Ukraine. It's absolutely ludicrous. If you're still defending this, get out. Just leave. I rather lose, like, what is it? There was a poll, like, in Republican Party, because I like Republicans. I like plurality of opinions. I know there's a lot of Democratic leaning US people that are watching me, and they're saying, okay, yeah, Republican Party was always bad and so on. But I like democracy. I like plurality of opinions. MAGA doesn't want democracy. MAGA stands for authoritarianism. Already now we see with the MAGA mic, the mini mic, he is single-handedly preventing a popular vote to be made because he does not want it. This is a single person's action. So when we're talking about what this MAGA stands for, it's definitely not Ukraine. Number two, Emmanuel Macron stated in his speech recently that we should not rule out sending NATO troops to Ukraine, which is great. This is specifically what I was talking about with regards to NATO policies and the serious discussions that we should have in Europe. We in European Union and just European continent in general need to understand that Russia is challenging the way of our life. Our peaceful coexistence, our peaceful futures are dependent on the peace in Ukraine. So if we do not take it seriously that Ukraine now, with dwindling support from US, will start losing positions, will start losing territory, and at some point there is a threat that Ukraine might fall if we don't support them enough. Because I'm sorry, Europeans, let's look into each other's eyes and say that we fucked up. We did not provide enough equipment. Kaja Kallas, Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen, everyone is stating there are weapons on our facilities, we just don't deliver them because we're rather going to export them on our trading contracts and make some of that money rather than think about our own security. So thinking and discussing at what point should we send a real military to support Ukrainians in that fight, to make sure that that conflict is contained within Ukraine, not because of the Ukrainians, but because of our self-preservation. So the French and German and other troops don't go into the Baltics fighting Russians when they're going to invade NATO. At that moment, we need to really now decide, how do we make sure? Now, it doesn't mean that the troops needs to go into the combat and fight Russians right away. No, we can just say, we're going to secure the eastern border of Europe or western border of Ukraine, so that the troops that are, for example, right now guarding the area around Transnistria in Ukraine are free to go and fight the Russians and so on. Or we can try to secure with additional anti-air assets. Our planes can patrol and fucking close the skies against the missiles, therefore preventing strikes against the critical targets in Ukraine, such as weapons manufacturers and factories. I know this is something not very much discussed in the news, but sometimes Russia does strike targets that are valuable in Ukraine, and we can prevent that if we do certain proactive action. This is a grown-up discussion. The inability of modern leaders in Europe to discuss and understand the impact of us going forward without us doing actions is going to leave us in a position where we're just going to be passive observers, and then it's going to be up to dictators to then act on their will when they see towards us, and we're going to be reactive. Being reactive in a state of warfare is a big no-no. Ask any military that knows anything about that. And finally, the absolute pinnacle of shitness, like the cherry on top, is Scholz speaking on Taurus and saying that in no ever case we will send Taurus missiles to Ukraine, and no, in every case we will be part of this conflict and so on. So this is not about Taurus. Like, we need to understand that it's not about the Taurus being made to Ukraine and so on. This is about the lack of the mindset and the strategic vision for certain leaders in Europe that we're still having. We have long been kind of knowing secretly that it was somewhere in Europe that were preventing strikes against targets in Russia. Now we know, like Scholz basically told us, yes, it was me. Now he lost any kind of sense of cloudness, like cloak and dagger kind of stuff. No, he's now openly stating, no, we will submit and I will push the whole European continent into humiliation fetish just because I want so. The immaturity of our leaders to assess the threat that Russia is facing to us in Europe is absolutely incredible. And I know why this is because it's a nuclear threat. Oh my God, if we ever become a party to fight Russia, Russia is going to use nukes. There we go, nuclear war, everyone dies. Well, the problem is that this is on Russia. This is not on us. What Mr. Scholz absolutely misses out here is that we get into escalation pattern, into Russia stating, okay, we're going to nuke us unless you give us this. We're going to do this unless you give us this. And then we don't get any place to stay. Like, we will be falling back and back and back and back. It's a game theory 101. We need to understand that this is not how dictators work. This is not how Putin's work. And this is absolutely obvious. Majority of leaders already in Europe understood that. Fucking Macron, the Mr. we should save Putin face, we should call Putin at any occasion, understands this. Why is it so hard in 2 years to realize that when the defense of Europe are targeted, we cannot just hold back in a fear of escalation? We got in this situation because we were afraid. 2008, Ukraine would have joined NATO if there would not be fear from Germany saying, no, they shouldn't be joining NATO. If Ukraine would be in NATO right now, there will not be this war. Russia would not attack NATO. Russia attacked Ukraine because Ukraine came out weak. Russia continuing their war efforts in Ukraine because it thinks that it can wait out the Western powers because they are weak. And then a Western leader comes out, basically opens up and says, yes, I am weak and I will make sure that we are continuing to be weak. Fuck you, Mr. Scholz. Just go. I shouldn't say it about the leaders of friendly democracies. It's a joke. We need to grow up. We need to understand the threats that we're posing. Inability of us Europeans to supply and show that we are not weak. We are not at least weaker than North Korea, because right now North Korea is supplying a lot more power than all of the European Union is. And until we get past it, we're going to be just looked at as a prey. And if we're going to have leaders, they're going to come out and say, yes, we are. Please slap us more, daddy. Then we're going to end up in a very, very bad place very, very soon. Thank you so much for watching this. I'm really glad to be back. My throat is absolutely killing me after this episode. So I'll see you next time. Love you all. Slava Ukraini.